So I've helped him out a lot financially, and his dad's helped him out a lot financially while he's. Yep.
Okay. So we're in Matthew 24 today. Last week we went all of Matthew 23 and then Matthew 24 verses 1 and 2. For the sake of this Bible study tonight, we are going to start back at Matthew 24 verse 1 and continue all the way through. I don't know how far we're going to get because Matthew 24 is very much an end times chapter, and so is Matthew 25. Matthew 25 is a parable. It's called the parable of the 10 virgins, and it's very much a rapture parable. I don't know if we are going to finish 24 tonight or not. If not, that's okay. So, as I said, Matthew 24 is about the end times. It's very much about the Great Tribulation. And we're going to talk about some scary things, or Jesus is. But Jesus doesn't tell us those scary things to make us afraid. He tells us those scary things to have hope because of what's happening after those scary things. And so we're going to jump into here, and we'll try to work through this here and see exactly what Jesus is saying. So I'm going to read Matthew 24, verses 1 through 14, and we'll talk about it, okay? Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So is there anything in here that you liked? Not a lot there to like, is there? Anything you didn't like or anything that upset you?
Well, I really love the way that God has laid it out for us so that we can, he's telling us what's coming.
Yeah,
right? And to not be afraid.
that's right. That's right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, let's start.
I just get freaked
Go
out
ahead,
about the
Jackie.
end time. I just get freaked out about the end times, and I don't like listening about it.
Yeah. Well,
It
when
just
we
scares me, right?
yeah. Well, when we break this down, you don't need to be as scared. Okay. So we're going to
Because I
start.
want to live in fear, right? I want to live in faith. So
Yes. Yes. So let's break this down. So 24:1, Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. Okay, so where was Jesus leaving? Did you guys get that? Where was Jesus leaving?
The temple?
The temple. Okay. Now, what were the disciples doing with Jesus? What did they come to point out?
The buildings of the temple.
You got it. Okay. Verse 2. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will be none left here, one stone upon another, that will not be thrown down." Okay. So what did Jesus say is going to happen to this temple?
That it's gonna fall down, like be taken apart.
That's right. That's right. So I'll tell you what happened. If you remember from last week, Jesus leaving the temple in this manner is very reminiscent of Ezekiel and the glory of God leaving the temple. Solomon's temple. This was called Herod's temple because Solomon's temple was destroyed in 586 BC. And this temple, Herod's temple, was rebuilt after the Jews came back from Babylon in 516 BC, and they started rebuilding the temple. So the temple would have been rebuilt by 476, something like that. And now we are first century, right? So it's been around for a long time. And there was a lot of gold in this temple, and the walls were covered in gold on the inside and the outside. And the Roman general Titus came and he destroyed the temple in 70 AD. And the soldiers flipped all the stones over. And you can go back to Jerusalem today, and it's just like how Jesus said it would happen. Okay? So that's what Jesus is talking about. Now, let's break this down in verse 3. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Okay, so first of all, where did Jesus sit down?
Mount of Olives.
Mount of Olives. So when you're in Jerusalem, it's it's the hill right across from the temple. Okay? And his disciples came and asked him a few questions. What were the questions in verse 3 that his disciples asked him?
Basically, when and where this is gonna happen.
Yeah, that's right. Tell us when these things will be. Okay. What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Those three things. So they want to know, when's the temple going to be destroyed? What will be the sign of your coming and the sign of the end of the age? So now Jesus is going to respond to this. Let's read verse 4. And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray." Okay. So why do you think that Jesus would say, "See that no one leads you astray"?
Because he knows that people are going to.
You're right. You're right. People will try to lead you astray. Verse 5. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. Oh, goodness. So people will come pretending to be Jesus? Is that what he's saying?
Exactly what he's saying.
Exactly what he's saying. Kind of like David Koresh and the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. He believed that he was a sinful Jesus. What's the guy? Oh, I can see him. The Kool-Aid guy, everyone, Jimmy Jones. Someone like that, right? So there's going to be many that are going to come saying they're Jesus, but they're not. Verse 6, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. So what two things are you going to hear about?
Wars and rumors of wars.
Okay, great. And what does Jesus say must happen? It says that these must happen, but the end isn't yet. Are we in a time of wars and rumors of wars?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so he says that wars and rumors of wars need to happen. And are we in a time of wars and rumors of wars?
Yes, we are.
We sure are. Okay. Verse 7, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Okay. So, who will rise against each other?
Nation against nation.
And kingdom against kingdom. Okay. Jesus is a Hebrew. He has Hebrew ancestry. The book of Matthew is the gospel written to the Jewish people, the Hebrew people. This nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom, that's a Jewish way of saying there will be world wars. Little interesting thing. Do you know what declaration was signed in World War I? It was a declaration called the Balfour Declaration. And it was a declaration that would give the land of Israel back to the Jews. So God used World War I to prepare the land for the people. World War II. What happened to the Jewish people?
Genocide.
A genocide. That's right. That's right. They call it the Holocaust. Now, Holocaust actually means to be set on fire. And they were actually put in the furnaces, weren't they? They were gassed and put in the furnaces. But there were many Jewish people displaced. Now, Isaiah 66 was written 700 years before Jesus came on the earth. Okay? And let me read to you what Isaiah 66 says. Isaiah 66 is the last chapter, written 700 years before Jesus. We'll say Jesus incarnate, okay? Because Jesus is eternal. Okay. And we're going to start in verse 7 and go to verse 8. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered a son. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such a thing? Shall a land be born in one day? Shall a nation be brought forth in a moment? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she brought forth her children. Can a nation be born in a day, God asks? And how long did it take Israel to become a nation? One day, May 14th, 1948. It was a desolate land, and the next day, May 13th, 1948, desolate land. May 14th, 1948, nation of Israel. One day. You think God knows what he's talking about?
Absolutely.
Very interesting, isn't it? Okay. And there will be, we're still in verse 7, and there will be famines. Okay, so let me go step back here. World War I was getting the land ready for the people. World War II was getting the people ready for the land. We'll see. We might get here tonight. We should be able to get here tonight. Okay. To show you something about the fig tree. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Okay, so those are world wars. And there will be famines. Has the earth seen famines since the world wars?
Not like we are probably prophesied in this.
Well, have we seen them in Africa?
Oh, yes, there's been various ones around the world.
Yeah. And have there been government instituted famines like in Ukraine from the USSR? Yeah. Sure haven't there? Okay. And earthquakes in various places. Have you seen the uptick in earthquakes? Especially since Israel became a nation. Extreme amount of earthquakes. Okay. Now, verse 8, all these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Okay. So what questions is Jesus answering here? When is that temple going to be destroyed? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Okay. Now, I want you to go to verse 9. That's where we're going next anyway. So what did Jesus just prophesy? World wars, 2 of them. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. What happened in that time? Balfour Declaration, and Israel becomes a nation in one day. And there's going to be famines and earthquakes. We've seen them all. Verse 9. What's the very first word in verse 9?
And
Then. What does then mean?
to come.
To come, or after this. Okay. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Okay, now we need to ask, who is he talking to? According to 24:1, who is he talking to?
Disciple.
His disciples. What nationality are his disciples?
Hebrew.
Hebrews. They're Jews. Okay. There's no Gentiles yet. The church isn't even formed yet because Jesus hasn't died yet. This is Jewish people. Okay. Then, so after these world wars, after the nation of Israel comes back, okay, the Balfour Declaration, right? The famines, the earthquakes. After this, then they will deliver you up to tribulation. He's saying, so after this time, there's going to be something called the tribulation. And they'll deliver you, the Jewish people, up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Well, that's interesting. Why will nations hate the Jews? What does it say? For my name's sake. So these are now Jews that believe in Jesus. Hold your finger here and go to Revelation 7. Okay. Now, let me show you how the book of Revelation is broken down. Okay. Chapter 1 is the introduction. Now, Jesus is speaking here, and in verse 19, Jesus gives us the keys to interpret the book of Revelation. And he says, write therefore the things that you have seen, those that are, and those that are to take place after this. Okay? So Jesus is speaking, John is writing. Chapters 2 and 3 are talking about 7 types of churches. Okay? After chapter 3, the word church is not mentioned again in the book of Revelation till the last chapter. Not mentioned again. It's gone. Chapter 4. After this. After what? After the church age. After this, remember, Jesus says, write what is and what is to come. So this is next. After this, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this. After what? After the church age. This is now the rapture. come up here. Okay? Chapter 5 is what heaven looks like. Chapter 6 is the beginning of the tribulation, and it is the 7 seals. 6 of those seals that launch the tribulation, they are broken open, and all these bad things start happening. Very bad things. Then there is a pause between the 6th seal and the 7th seal. And this is the pause in chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 1. After I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so no wind might blow on the earth or sea against any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God. And he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the earth and sea, saying, do not harm the earth or sea or trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. So, who are the sealed ones?
Tribes of Israel.
Okay, these are not what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach. Okay, that there are only 144,000 are going to heaven. That's all it teaches. These people are still on earth. They're Israeli. Do you know who the seal of God is? The Holy Spirit. So now the church is gone, and now it's Jewish people who are now living for Jesus. Is this making sense now?
Yes.
Let's go back to Matthew 24. Okay, verse 9. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation, and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Now, these are Jewish believers in Jesus. Verse 10. Then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. It'll be a great falling away also. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. So during this during this tribulation time, many false prophets are going to show up and lead many astray. On a side note, do we have a lot of false prophets today?
Tons.
Tons, and they seem to be all on TikTok and YouTube. Verse 12, and because lawlessness, thank you, son, and my charger too, please. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. So now there's going to be lawlessness during this tribulation. It's going to be anarchy. No law. Anarchy. Thank you, son. Can you plug that into the wall for me, please? So when you have anarchy, is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing? There's no law. There's no police to help you. It's going to be worse than the Wild West. And because it's anarchy, there's not going to be any love. If you go back to Revelation chapter 6, let me read that to you. Now, I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come!" And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and his rider had a bow and a crown, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. When he opened the second seal, I heard a second living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another. And he was given a great sword. Isn't that interesting? Peace is gone because of the lawlessness, and people are killing each other. This just isn't war. It's neighbor going against neighbor. You know what I mean? Let's go back to Matthew 24. Verse 13. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. So who's going to be saved?
The ones that endure to the end.
Okay, so this is not Jumanji. Okay, what he's saying is the ones that remain in the faith in Jesus Christ and endure to the end will be saved. Okay. Verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So who do you think will be preaching this gospel of the kingdom to the whole world? Those 144,000 Jewish people that are sealed. And that's why they're hated. Okay? So now, verse 15. What word does verse 15 say? What word does verse 15 start with?
Therefore.
Therefore. Okay, mine says so or therefore. So was that you, Liz, that said therefore?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, in Bible interpretation, whenever you see a therefore in the Bible, you always must ask, what is the therefore? Okay? Because of what Jesus has said, because of everything we've just gone through, this is what he says, so or therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Okay, so what is this abomination of desolation? Well, Jesus gives us a hint. It's in the book of the prophet Daniel. So, if you guys know where Daniel is, turn to Daniel. If you don't worry about it. I'll just read it to you. And it's going to be in Daniel chapter 11. Okay. Daniel 11:32. Okay, I think we'll start in 29. At that time appointed he shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be this time as it was before. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and the fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. 32. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. You can read more about what happens in this abomination that causes desolation. But we have to look at this in the context of Matthew 24, 1 and 2. I want to talk to you about a big theological term. I'm going to give you the term, and I'm going to tell you what the term means. The term is called preterism. Okay? You have full-blown preterists and you have partial preterists. What does that mean? A preterist is somebody who believes that all this prophecy was fulfilled in 70 AD. Isn't that interesting? What do you think about that? Do you think all this was fulfilled in 70 AD? What are your thoughts? Do you think that Christ has returned in 70 AD?
Sorry, I was away. No, absolutely not.
Not okay. Okay. So no, none of this has really, some of this has happened, not all of it. Okay. Let me see something here. Pull this one up. This one in. Try that. There, that's better. Okay. So now, we know that Herod's temple, from this study, was destroyed in 70 AD, which means that this abomination that causes desolation happens after 70 AD. Do you know that there has not been a Jewish temple since 70 AD? So what must happen sometime either before or during the tribulation?
The temple needs to be rebuilt.
The temple needs to be rebuilt. And there's going to be an abomination that happens in the temple. Something that is abominable to God. And that will cause desolation. Now, to be desolate means to be totally annihilated. This is something that will cause annihilation. Okay. Now remember, church is gone. It's Jewish Christians now, and the people that come to believe in Christ during the Great Tribulation is not the church. We call them tribulation saints. Okay? So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So who's to flee to the mountains?
To be the believers, those in
Yeah,
Judea.
the people in Judea. Okay. So Judea is where Israel is. Okay? Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And you might be thinking, why are people on their housetops? In Israel, we have our back deck, right? They don't have a back deck. Their deck is on the roof of their house. You want to go have a barbecue? You go have it on the roof. Sounds kind of silly, but it's a flat deck kind of thing on the roof of the house. Okay? So it's saying get off that roof and get going. Don't even grab your cloak. Just get out of there because it's going to be bad. Now, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. Okay, so you don't want it in winter because it's going to be really cold, and you don't want it in the Sabbath because you can't, in the Sabbath, there's a law that you can't even walk on the Sabbath day the length of a football field. Okay. Verse 21. Where are we? We've got 20 minutes left. For then there will be great tribulation. So they were in tribulation before, and now it's great tribulation. What we see from the book of Daniel, okay, and the book of Revelation is the tribulation is split into two parts. The first 3.5 years that are really bad. And the second 3.5 years that are extremely bad. In that second 3.5 years, well, let's read about it. Now, where's the church? Is the church here? No. But where are we right now as the church? We are between verses 8 and 9. That's where we are right now. On the timeline, that's where we're at. That's how close the world is to this right now. Okay? Verse 21, for then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been seen from the beginning of the world until now, and never will be. How bad is this going to be?
The worst the world's ever seen.
Okay, I want you to think about something. This is going to be worse than Nazi Germany. Did you get that? Think about the worst day of your life. It's going to be worse than that. It's going to be worse than the flood. It's going to be worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. It's going to be the worst time the world has ever seen and will ever see again. This will be when you look back at world history and eternity from now, they'll say this was the very worst time ever. Okay? Verse 22. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. Did you hear that? If Jesus didn't have a time limit on this, how many people would be saved?
None.
None. They'd be destroyed. Every single person. That's how bad it's going to be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Now, there is controversy on what this word elect means. And I'm not going to go into the big controversy right now. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you might vehemently disagree with me. And I'm okay with that. Because Matthew is the gospel written to the Jewish people, and because the Great Tribulation is focusing on the salvation of the Jewish people, and it's the Jewish people who believe in Jesus that are being hated by the world, the elect here are Jewish Christians during this Great Tribulation. Okay? Now, Liz, I do know that this is your very first Bible study with us, and it's usually not this in-depth or this intense. Okay? You just came on a night where it's probably the most difficult chapter in the Bible.
Oh, good.
Okay. Verse 23. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, there he is, do not believe it. Okay, because this is such a bad time, people are looking for the Messiah. They're looking for the Christ. And Jesus is saying, don't believe him. It's the worst time in human history. Don't believe when people say your Savior's coming. Verse 24. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. So what are these false Christs and false prophets going to do? They're going to perform signs and wonders. These are legitimate miracles. Now, we're going through the book of Acts, right? With Lifehouse Connection. And we saw that Peter and John healed a guy, a crippled man, in Acts chapter 4 through the power of Jesus. He was over 40 years old. He was so crippled he couldn't walk since he was born. And you just say, in the name of Jesus Christ, get up and walk. That is a sign and a wonder. These false Christs, these false prophets will be performing those kinds of signs. They're not parlor tricks. They are demonically powered signs. Okay? For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. So what Jesus is saying is, if it was possible to lead the Jewish Christians astray, they could, but they can't. Jesus isn't allowing that. But that is how powerful these signs are. That even believers in Christ, if Jesus did not force them not to believe in that, they would have. These will look like legitimate signs. "28. See, I have told you beforehand." Jesus is giving them warnings beforehand. this is going to happen. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. Okay, why do you think Jesus would say that? Now, we're in the book of Acts with Lifehouse Connections. How did Jesus go back into heaven? He went up into the sky, right? He just shot straight up. The angels that were with the disciples, how did they tell him, tell the disciples that he was coming back? Do you remember? The same way he went up, that's the same way he's coming down.
But his feet won't touch the ground.
Oh, we're talking about two different things.
Oh, sorry.
We're talking about the return of Christ. So the rapture happens somewhere between verses 8 and 9. Starting verse 9, this is now the Great Tribulation. And they're waiting on the return of Christ. Okay?
Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. You're going to see this right across the sky, he's saying. So wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. He's saying wherever the dead people are, don't stay around them. Watch. Dead people, vultures will go where deadness is. Jesus is life. Don't gather with the vultures. Look for Jesus in the sky. Okay? Now we've got I think we're going to go until verse 35. We might go a few minutes over here, okay? Now, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation. Now, the tribulation is 7 years long. Immediately after. Not 100 years, not a year, not a month, not a week. Immediately after this tribulation. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. The powers of the heavens being shaken, this is the demonic rulers. Okay? Meaning the powers of the heavenly places, of the heavenly realms, the spirit world. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds in heaven with power and great glory. So we see everyone mourning because they hated Jesus, they were killing his people, and everyone's going to see him return. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now, This is a very important passage that I want to finish with. And it's verses 32 to 35. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. Okay, what kind of tree? Fig. Okay. There's 3 trees that represent Israel in the Bible. The fig tree, the olive tree, and the grapevine. Now, from the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. Okay? So also when you see all these things, what things? Well, let's go back. We see 2 world wars. From those world wars, we have the Balfour Declaration. Then Israel is given its national sovereignty. Now there's going to be famines and earthquakes, and we're seeing a lot of those. Then between verses 8 and 9 is the rapture. Now, from the fig tree. If you read Luke, it says from the fig tree and all the other trees. But Matthew specifically says the fig tree. Why do you think Matthew says the fig tree and not all the other trees? Because it has to do strictly with Israel. Hold your finger here and go to the prophet Habakkuk. Habakkuk's hard to find. Let me read it to you. It's going to be Habakkuk 3. Let me tell you what's happening. Habakkuk is, after Jeremiah, prophesying the same thing. Babylon is coming, and Babylon is going to destroy you. Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk. Okay. So now, what ended up happening in 586 BC is Israel, most of it was destroyed, and then whatever was left was put into captivity in Babylon for 70 years and then returned to the land, but they lost their national sovereignty. They were never a nation again until May 14th, 1948. So this is the very end of the prophet Habakkuk, chapter 3, verse 17. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vine, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord, I will take joy in the God of my salvation. What's the first thing that he mentions? The fig tree. It doesn't blossom. Israel's dead. So as we go back to this, remember Matthew's written to the Jewish people. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ written to the Jewish people. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. Meaning, when Israel becomes a nation again, you know all of this. This is the time clock. So also when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Who? Jesus. He's at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. What generation? The generation that sees Israel become a nation between verses 8 and 9. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So how close are we to the rapture? Extremely close. Are we going to go through this kind of tribulation? No. We will be out of here. This is designed for the Jewish people. That's a whole nother story out of the book of Daniel and the rest of the world. But we are very, very close to this. Next week, we will start in verse 36. Amen.